We're going to turn now in the context of this group, CAIR, using Southern Poverty Law Center fraudulent information to defame the chairman of the board of the Center for Security Policy, Miles Prentice, on the grounds that he works with an organization that has been vilified by the SPLC on their hate list. A colleague of ours, Jim Simpson, a former official in the Office of Management and Budget, an investigative reporter, a very impressive author, including of 2 books directly relevant to this subject, I'm pleased to say, both published by the Center for Security Policy Press, again, both available for free as downloadable PDFs at securefreedom.org. The first is called The Red-Green Axis: Refugees, Immigration, and the Agenda to Erase America. The second one, which is literally hot off the presses, is The Red-Green Axis 2.0, an existential threat to America and the world. Jim has also recently authored a very important piece at Capital Research magazine, in which he talks about what CAIR is doing to people like Miles Prentice. And we've invited him here to discuss his insights and the important conclusions that, among others, the mayor of Norwich, Connecticut, a remarkable and I think very decent man by the name of Peter Nystrom, who is being attacked in effect by CAIR, pressing him to somehow disassociate Miles Prentice from the Connecticut Tigers baseball team, a minor league team that plays in Norwich, Connecticut. So Jim Simpson, tell us about the agenda of CAIR as it relates specifically to those who are working with organizations like ours.
Thank you very much, Frank, and thanks for having me here today. You know, I want to add to what you've said about the council. They bill themselves as a tax-exempt social welfare organization under the auspices of the IRS 501c3 code. The Council on American Islamic Relations is not a social welfare organization. It is an extremist organization dedicated to first undermining and destroying its enemies and then pushing the supremacist agenda that Frank identified as Sharia supremacy. And they collude in this effort with a broad range of leftist organizations, communist organizations, to vilify, marginalize, and financially destroy those organizations that are specifically calling them out on those agendas. You have to get that straight. That is exactly what they are doing. That's exactly what they're about. Nothing more and nothing less. At the very least, CAIR should be stripped of its 501c3 tax-exempt status, and those investigations, which were ongoing prior to the election of President Barack Obama, who shut them down, should be restarted, and CAIR should be investigated both for its ties and support of terrorism and for its subversive agenda in the United States. And hopefully I can explain a little bit more of how they're doing that in the time that I have allotted. I have to add that this Jerry Boykin, Lieutenant General Boykin, talked at length about the Southern Poverty Law Center, but I want to add something to that. The Southern Poverty Law Center has worked with communists since its inception, and its hate agenda was taken directly from a strategy designed, created, and articulated by the German communist named Herbert Marcuse. And Herbert Marcuse created this concept called partisan tolerance, which was partisan tolerance of ideas from the left and complete intolerance of ideas from those opposing the left. And that intolerance includes law-breaking, violence, for example, today's Antifa, and doing everything possible to silence opposition voices. And Marcuse himself was merely echoing what first Soviet leader Vladimir Lenin said in 1917. Listen to this. He said, "We must be ready to employ trickery, deceit, law-breaking, withholding and concealing truth. We can and must write in a language which sows hate, revulsion, and scorn towards those who disagree with us." Isn't that what we are seeing writ large with the left today? This is the Southern Poverty Law Center's hate agenda, specifically brought to them by Herbert Marcuse, who worked closely for many years with Southern Poverty Law Center co-founder Julian Bond, and who came up with the entire idea of shutting down ideas that the left opposes. So with that said, now CAIR and the other Muslim Brotherhood groups that it represents have all joined in an unholy alliance with the Southern Poverty Law Center, the American Civil Liberties Union, Saul Alinsky's Industrial Areas Foundation, and other extreme left Antifa and other extreme left groups to intimidate and silence us. And I would say that the mayor of Norwich is personally experiencing some of that pressure right now. CAIR is demanding a seat at the table to decide what they should do with Miles Prentice because he just happens to own a baseball team and at the same time has joined as the chairman of the board of directors of one of the most widely respected national security think tanks in Washington, D.C. Since when do they have any right to do anything like that? And why, more importantly, has anybody taken them seriously at all? Now, CAIR recently came out with a report. It's called Hijacked by Hate, American Philanthropy and the Islamophobia Network. Now, what exactly is Islamophobia? Because, you know, who knows what they're talking about here? It sounds like they're talking about anybody that expresses bigoted hate towards Muslims, but that's really not the definition. The definition, let me read some of the definitions to you. They include, if you issue the words Islamic terrorism, Islamist terrorism, jihadism, Islamic jihadism, Sharia supremacism, if you so much as mention these words, you are an Islamophobe, a bigot, and a hater, and you need to shut up. That is their message. And this report, which they co-authored with the Southern Poverty Law Center, is so fraught with falsehoods and inaccuracies, it would be funny if so many mainstream media organizations didn't just take it without criticism as gospel truth. But it's absurd if you look into it. For example, they talk about 39 xenophobic organizations which together take in billions of dollars from a dark network of funders and what they call donor-advised funds, which don't require donors to name themselves. Of those 39, well, first of all, in order to get $1 billion in this example they provide, they have to add up all of these 39 organizations. Oh, but wait, it's not 39 organizations. It's actually 46 organizations. They miscounted. They have to add up their revenues for 3 years. But even more important than that, 2/3 of all of those revenues are earned by the Christian broadcasting networks. That is Pat Robertson's 700 Club. Now, I don't know about you, but I can't think of the oldest, largest Christian broadcasting network in the nation being an Islamophobe, taking dark money from evil foundations. It's a joke. If you take out that one organization which covers every type of issue there is in the news, if you take it out, the remaining organizations earn on average about $3 million a year. Some of them earn less than $100,000 a year. Jerry referred to an organization that the Southern Poverty Law Center counts as 500 organizations. That would be Act for America. Well, all of those 500 organizations are voluntary. Act for America itself, in its latest tax return, showed receipts of $125,000. Now, if those other vastly funded 500 Islamophobic organizations were to get some of that money, they'd have to get $257 each per year. So the whole idea is a joke. Meanwhile, CAIR does not mention the kind of money it makes. Oh, and I would also add, they single out 6 of those organizations that they particularly can't stand, which includes the Center for Security Policy, the American Freedom Law Center, and a few others. And they claim that these groups collectively make $18 million a year. Well, the only way they do that is to add up almost 10 years of revenues for all those organizations. Meanwhile, what does CAIR take in annually? Well, guess what? It takes in by itself over $14 million a year, and it claims $11 million in assets, which is more than the collection of the other 6 do in fact. And CAIR does not mention that the Washington Trust Foundation, run by the very same guy who defines Islamophobia, Issam Omish, one of the founders of the Dar al-Hijra Mosque in Falls Church, which has harbored Islamic terrorists. Can we say Islamic terrorism? No, we're Islamophobes. He runs the Washington Trust Foundation, which has an additional $5 million in real estate assets owned by CAIR, but CAIR doesn't mention that. So even the amounts that they do have show on the books are not accurate. These are just a few examples of the kind of fraudulent accounting they engage in to vilify and dox their enemies. And the worst part of it is, in this report, they go after these donor-advised funds, and they claim that this dark network of Islamophobes take money from these donor-advised funds like Schwab, Proteus, Fidelity. Well, guess what? So does the Council on American Islamic Relations and almost every one of its other Muslim Brotherhood organizations in the United States. And collectively, they, along with their left-wing allies, are a multi-billion-dollar network. When you put together the assets of CAIR, Islamic Circle of North America, Muslim American Society, the Southern Poverty Law Center, and others, $1.6 billion in assets in 1 year. You don't have to add up years to get to that. So their entire narrative is fraudulent, and people need to understand this. They have no legitimate seat at the table. If they were really moderate Muslims, as they claim, they would be standing shoulder to shoulder with Frank Gaffney and General Boykin and others like them against this Islamic extremist terrorist agenda. But instead, they engage in lawfare and other unsavory practices to shut down anybody that brings that to light or criticizes them in any way. As far as I'm concerned, they're a domestic terrorist group as well. Thank you.
Jim Simpson, again, thank you very much for your research, for your clarity on so many of these points. This is really at present the heart of the matter, it seems to me. Do the Council on American Islamic Relations leadership and their ilk actually speak for Muslims in America? Do they deserve a seat at the table? Is their agenda actually representative of what Muslims in this country want?